Welcome, welcome. This will be a kit bashing session. So I have pre-loaded a few models here. These are all from Sketchfab. I grabbed a creature, a mech kind of robot spaceship, photogrammetry of a statue, and somebody's custom building model. And additionally, I have loaded in this kitbash collection. This kit of parts is available to you. I have loaded it into the workshop folder, and you'll notice I'll just kind of reset my view here for a second around this stuff. There's a lot of really interesting objects here. We got some cables which we can bend around potentially. We've got pistons and all sorts of nice little greeblies for us to play with. I encourage you to take a look at that, but this will be more for detailing. We could probably make use of some of these for larger formal moves as well, but I'll mostly be using these for detailing later, and maybe I'll get to that in this video. We'll see how much time I have. Really, the focus on this one though is about the kind of macro form of whatever is getting bashed. And I have all of these in here. I'm not totally decided what I'm going to do. I grabbed a creature though, or a kind of character, just in case like maybe I want to bash a character, but you know, the process is really the same for all of these different types. What I'm really thinking though is I'm going to kit bash this statue into something new, and I might use this building. We'll see. Really, I'm just going to end up playing some music probably over most of this as I just work, and I'll try to explain like some key decisions potentially as we go, but a lot of this is just going to be trying to get into the zone and create something interesting. So I'm just going to get started, and I am really digging this statue. I like it a lot because it's got a nice kind of mobility to it. It's like a dynamic pose. It's also pre-posed, right? So that's also quite nice about it. And it's got some props that we can clean up or bash around with, and these animals which we can convert into something else. I think in this first little pass I'll just be kind of robotizing these guys, and I don't know, we'll see where it goes. So really, by starting here, I'm just trying to mass out what this is going to be. And I already knew I was going to turn these things into robots somehow. I just started replacing the key part of their body, which is the head, the face. I just picked something that had a nice axial relationship with the body. The spheres were a natural fit for the head, and then the long kind of metal piece that extended off the top gave it a really nice setup. And you'll see as I start placing these around, I'm just making copies as I go, and it is such a crucial part of this process. If you're doing this by hand, that's one thing you just can't do. So you already have superpowers by just making a copy. It's amazing. I'm being sloppy with the mesh cropping underneath. I was planning on sculpting it later on, so I wasn't too careful with it. In hindsight, I wish I had been a bit more careful with it, and I'd spent a little bit more time placing those heads on that second dog. But regrets are regrets. If I come back and redo this, I would fix that. You'll notice a time pause there because I had to go get my coffee. Coffee is recommended highly for this process. As I started doing some different these cropping moves on this mesh, I realized that the shading was getting gunked up, and I wanted to just go ahead and fix that, and so I tried applying a couple of remesh modifiers. This photogrammetry was really detailed though, so I had to up the octree depth super high, and that was another maybe regret of this process, is I upped the polygon count way too early in the I probably could have left it alone for longer. And you'll notice here I'm actually even going through the scene, and I'm like turning off and on objects to see like where all these polygons in the scene are actually coming from. And I just eventually settle on doing a smooth remesh at a depth of 10, which gave me a really nice kind of remeshed view of the body there. Now, I started messing around with this building underneath. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it yet, but I had a few ideas. Eventually, though, I will decide to delete it because every time I tried to get some of the pieces unnested, they were just like deeply grouped, and I didn't really want to go through the process of messing with that. And so I was just following the path of least resistance, and I said, I'll just focus on the character. I did keep one of the air conditioning units around, though, just in case I wanted to copy the air conditioning unit around. You'll see now I started scaling up these kitbashing parts. Started browsing around, seeing what might fit. I'm already like keeping the statue in mind at this point. I did decide, though, to just go ahead and replace David's head, or the hunter's head here. I could have even left the hair coming out of the top. It looks like a VR headset or something, but I wanted to cover it at first, and then I ultimately just decided to go ahead and crop off the hair by editing the mesh underneath. It's okay to be sloppy on this kind of digital process sometimes, because if you're going to be merging objects, these like messy edges will be hidden, or they'll even just get absorbed into other objects. That said, the cleaner you are as you go, the easier your life will be. In this case, I was definitely favoring speed over precision, but that's not always best. So now I decided to just replace the staff with one of these kitbash kind of sci-fi rods, almost like a Jedi staff or something. But I was just being careful not to select main parts of the body, and eventually I just was able to isolate the rest of the staff there and just delete it off. At this point, I was just feeling around. I wanted to replace the face, so I just grabbed another one of those same spheres to give the dogs and the body, the human, a kind of contiguous identity there. I thought you could use some jewelry, a little bit like an elf ear or something, so I just used that same piece. That was a really good piece. That was a piece straight off of that one spaceship model. I decided to go ahead and use a bend modifier on this set of cables to replace this leash, because I noticed as I was working that the leash was a super messy geometry. And I thought that not only would this kind of triple cable look better, but it would also help make it more a custom piece. So now I'm just deleting out that leash. I should have, in hindsight too, I should have gone ahead and done the same treatment to the other leash, but I just kept moving and didn't really think twice about it. I had this steel joint piece that I was trying around. I started realizing that I could probably replace the legs on the creatures too. But as I say, less is more. I decided to just go ahead and just put it as like a detail, like a more subtle detail on the body. I started playing with the heads a little bit more. So another regret I do have about this in hindsight is that top eye on the front dog there. I wish I had been flipped so it was more like the other dog, but I just rolled with it. Here I'm actually going through the process of merging those meshes all together, and I deleted everything else out of the scene. I did a file save as, so that I had a version of the scene that had all of the pieces still, but then I now have this clean version of the scene with only this merged mesh. And I went ahead and went for the remesh modifier here to unify them all into a singular object. At this stage, you definitely do not have to push these remeshes as hard as I am. You can see that I'm even pushing it so hard that the imperfections of the original mesh are showing. And this is just because I like to sculpt, but really you can get away with way lower octree depths. You can see that this is super bloated, the scene and the face and polygon count. You can be much more careful with this, but I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can do this, and it'll probably slow down my process some, but we'll see what happens. At this point, I went ahead and started composing a shot for the character. I set up a camera, I set up the studio backdrop with a nice simple bevel off of the plane, and I'm starting to play with some of the lighting and just feeling out what it might be. I did even a test render at this stage, just to get a feel for how it was coming along. You know, at the end of the day, like a lot of these objects, how you experience them and how their output is simply through the imagery of them. And very much like the scene building process and the Unreal Engine workshop, a lot of times you're designing specifically for the camera. I was taking advantage of this through the whole process because I knew from the beginning I was going to be showing it from this front. And so I didn't even spend as much time like detailing out the back. And while that's not necessarily like the best thing to do all the time, for this concept phase, I think it's a really key part of just keep moving, keep up the momentum. Now you'll see I'm starting to use the sculpting tools, and I actually imported a couple of nice textures that are from the Substance Designer package, which I might show briefly, maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. But basically, it's just height maps. These grayscale gradient textures, and they are for different objects and things. So I have this kind of grungy one and scales one, but I'm just going through and smoothing up some of the messier areas that came through because of the remesh, and then I'm actually just texturizing the literal mesh with the texture brush. You can do this with materials as well. I've been really infatuated by just shadows on white objects, so I've been recently doing a lot more of just sculpting and geometry work. I do realize though that this is a little bit heavier on the computer, and so it's not always ideal. This neck portion, which is where I was sloppy with my cropping on the mesh earlier, gave me quite the headache, and that's definitely the messiest area on the entire kitbash. And you can't really tell that much from the renders that came out afterwards, but I know I will see that every time. The final regret that I had about this piece was that final texture I applied to the tips of the front dog. I just wanted to put some kind of, I don't know, sci-fi texture on the front end, but I really wish I had just left it smooth or more grungy texture like the rocks and the body. But you do what you do. While it was rendering, I went and looked up that download and found where it existed. I did actually find the location on the map, but it's from this castle is where this real statue is, so I thought that was cool. But I was just going through the process of iterating. I did decide, though, I wanted him to have some hair, so I actually made a vertex group on the back of his head and ran a really simple hair simulation. This got really heavy because the mesh had so many polygons, but I'm using the particle brush edit to give the hair a kind of swoopy setup there, and I'm just like going in and fine combing the hair a little, and then I just went for a render, and I was super happy with how that turned out. Really gave it a lot of character. These test renders are taking some time. I was cranking the samples up higher than they probably needed. At the end of the day, it's all about the renders at this stage, because the images of these objects are what you keep afterwards, and the higher the quality it is now, the less you have to worry about it later. I did decide to try and texturize the ground. This ended up being a bit of a failed experiment because I didn't really want to spend the time to do it well. I was just trying to do this kind of quick and dirty solution of subdividing out a ground and putting a texture displacement. But I wasn't really happy with how it looked, and I started realizing the polygon count in the scene was like giving me a headache already, and so I didn't really want to push it much farther. I think the best version of this would have been if I had just gone through and sculpted out a proper groundscape, and then it would have been like a character in a landscape, which would have been even cooler than him just standing on the white background. But all in all, I was pretty happy with this character. I'll use it later on for my own fantasy work, inspiration stuff. It was a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy this kind of process, and hopefully this is exciting to you.